everybody, it's Amy. I'm the marketing director here at the Content Marketing Institute. If you missed the regular entry deadline for the Content Marketing Awards, don't worry, there's still time to get your entries in. But hurry, because the final deadline is just days away. One of the best parts of our jobs here at CMI is to recognize content marketers.
We're so happy to do this every year.
So head over to contentmarketingawards.com and submit your entry now. And if you've started an entry but haven't completed it, make sure you finish up by the deadline. We can't wait to see your hard work and innovation, content marketers.
Hello. Happy Monday, everyone. It's Amanda with the Content Marketing Institute. Thank you for joining me for this Ask the CM World Community Livestream, where each time we dive into a new topic with an awesome member of our CM World community. And today we are talking about podcasting and live streaming. And for some reason, I have not had anyone on to talk about this yet on the live stream. I have no idea why, but we are going to talk about those two today. They're similar in many ways, but obviously different in some. So we are going to get all kinds of great tips and advice on that today. So I'm super excited about that. If you don't know, today's live stream is brought to you by the Content Marketing Institute. We are the leading training and education organization for, you guessed it, all things content marketing. You can head over to contentmarketinginstitute.com for all kinds of resources and educational content. And I want to remind you of this, folks. It's really the final week to submit your entries for the 2023 Content Marketing Awards. It's the largest, longest running content marketing awards program in the world. So we want to see all your great work. We love to award and recognize content marketers. So head over to contentmarketingawards.com, submit your work, finish your entry, whatever you need to do. Let's see it. Friday is the deadline. So get those entries in, everyone. All right, as you join me today, you should know the drill. Say hello, let me know where you're joining us from. If you have any questions or comments as we go along, please feel free to drop them into the comment section below. You know that makes for a more engaging live stream if we hear from all of you. So let's get the ball rolling here. Let's ask the question of the day. Are you podcasting or live streaming? If so, how's it going? Do you have challenges? Do you have any issues, any questions about anything? Let us know. And if you have the link to the podcast or live stream, drop it in the comments as well. I'd love to see what all of you are working on. So for some of us who've done it for a while, it's a little easier. If you're just getting started, you may be having some issues. So let us know. Let us know how it's going. We'd love to hear from you. I see Chanel is joining us from London. Cher is joining us from Toronto. Thanks, everyone. Again, let us know where you're joining us from. We'd love to hear from you. Okay, so have you been thinking of starting a podcast or a live stream as part of your content marketing efforts, but you're wondering if you have what it takes to keep it going? Or maybe you've started, but you're struggling to keep it going or build an audience. Today, we're going to get some expert tips and advice on setting yourself up for success when it comes to content marketing or podcasting and live streaming. Joining me today to chat is someone I just met. I'm super excited for all of you to meet. Steve Worthy is a highly experienced retail leader and podcaster who has identified the potential of live streaming for podcasters. Through his Podcasters Live Academy, Steve offers a comprehensive training, whether you're a novice or experienced podcasters, on how to stream effectively, grow your audience, and enhance your engagement. Steve, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, wow. I'm excited to be here. I see a lot of people in the chats talking about they started a podcast, they stopped, There's so much content that I'm like bursting at the seams to talk about. So I'm happy to be here, Amanda.
Yes, so we have Laura also joining us from Calgary. So yes, if you're joining us, say hello. Let us know where you're joining us from. Like I said, if you're podcasting, live streaming, let us know. How's it going? We love to see it. I'd love to hear about it. All right, as we know, Steve, podcasts are very popular, but the rate of failure is very, very high. And what the majority of podcasts don't make it past 7 episodes.
Right.
So it's a great content marketing effort, but what are the main reasons that you see podcasts fail?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there probably there's so many, right? Consistency, all these things, having a content calendar, all those things, right? But I think about it in the context before you even get there, right? I think there's 4 things we talk about: mismanaged expectations, lack of passion around your content pillars, afraid to try something different, and you try to do it alone, right? I'll start about the first one, was about trying to do this alone. When I started podcasting in 2007, I stopped at around 2012, started back at around 2017. And in that little interim time, I was in the business world. And so super competitive. And when I moved into podcasting, I thought the world of podcasting was going to be very similar, was going to be extremely competitive. What I learned is that no, they're extremely embracing. They embraced me like I was like one of their own. And I think one of the tendencies that we have in the podcaster when you start podcasting is that you think that you have to do this alone, and you really truly don't. The other part of it is mismanaged expectations. We see the popular podcast getting tons and tons of downloads, all this engagement, and our thought process is like, well, I can do that. Well, you don't know their backstory. You don't realize that they've probably been doing it for about 10, 15 years, and they have been grinding during this process. And so it's important that you understand and have and create realistic expectations around what are you using this platform for? What are the results that you actually want to have? And then also kind of stair step your way into some of those goals, into some of that success as well. And then the last piece we'll just kind of talk about is really just around the content. I think you and I were talking a little bit about this off air, is that if you are not passionate about what you're talking about, if you can't talk about it ad nauseum, right, where it gets on the nerves of everybody around you, then I'm not particularly sure you may have really good, I guess, content to actually talk about for a long period of time. What we see is there's a lot of trends, and people want to jump on the new and latest thing to talk about. Man, that's probably about 4 or 5 episodes. That's it. Content from a podcasting standpoint, you got to think about it from a long game. So mismanaged expectations. Don't try to do this by yourself, and make sure you have solid content pillars so that you can build upon.
Well, let's start in there with the content piece of it. And you talk about finding the right niche or focus for your podcast, which I'm sure you kind of just talked about. Why is that so important? And what are some of your tips on actually finding that focus?
Yeah, part of it is I'll use my own experience for when I started back podcasting in 2017. I started a podcast called The Worthy Podcast, and it was around diversity, coaching, and leadership. 3 very broad topics. And I was like, this is what I want to do. And I ended up getting a coach. And what he did was he ran me through my overall experience. And he said, Steve, let's talk about this retail stuff that you do. And I said, I don't want to do that. I don't want to talk about it. He said, humor me. And he asked me about my retail experience. And he said, okay, do this. Next time we meet, come back with 13 episodes around retail. Amanda, I actually came back to him with 40 different topics. And what I realized was that I was hiding this gift that I had around a passion that I have for retail leadership. And once I was able to do that and narrow my focus, I realized that I had content for days. I had a built-in audience. I was able to actually impact a really good subset of people instead of trying to focus in on a broad set of people. I was able to hone my skills and utilize my experience to actually move my audience from where they are to where they want to be. I think the tendency sometimes when we start talking about niching down is that we think it's exclusionary. To some degree it is. You want the right people to hear your content. Your content isn't for everybody. And I think the tendency is that the sooner you can understand that, the better off you'll be. The other side of it is that it actually will help you become more of an authority, right? The tendency is that we want to talk about everything. And when you talk about everything, I'm not sure if you can become an authority on everything. But if you focus in and narrow your focus, that's when the expertise and influence really comes to play.
That's great. You can't be everything. Can't boil the ocean. That's what they say. We talked about that.
Oh, I love that one. Yeah, I love that one. I love that one.
Content marketing. Laura says we do weekly webinars and we've been doing them for a while, but we're looking into opening it up to more people through live streaming. So she's looking for today's tips.
Oh, good.
Cher says, I've been live streaming for a while, but really want to start a short form podcast, 13 minutes ish. So she is working on that. All right. Another big thing for whether it's a podcast or a live stream is preparation. So what are your tips for making sure you're prepared, not only for individual podcasts, but for the long haul as well?
The one question I ask everybody that, before we start working with them is that what podcast do you listen to? And it will like blow you away how many people want to start a podcast who don't listen to podcasts. And it's like, you want to be a chef, but I don't like knives, right? No, he's like, no, you can't. Stop it. Stop it. Like, so that's one of the first questions I ask before you even talk about gear, content, or anything. Like, what's a podcast that you listen to? So when we start talking about the long haul and preparation, part of that is actually learning your craft. And one of the best ways to do that is to listen to as many different podcasts as possible, because you will start to learn the different nuances around different techniques, content preparations, show structure, different segments. All these things get ingrained in your head the more consumption that you do from a podcasting standpoint. The other thing that we always talk about is how do you just kind of keep everything simple, right? Don't make everything complicated around your show structure, because your first 7 to 15 episodes aren't going to be that great. You are going to have to go through that rigmarole of, like we were just talking about it off air, like hearing your own voice. I don't like the sound of my voice. I don't like the way I look on camera. But all of those things are part of the process. Listening to a whole bunch of podcasts, having a simplified structure for your process. And then this is one of the last ones, and a lot of people fail to think about this, is having a consistent place where you can actually record your podcast. The tendency is that I'm going to record it over here. I'm going to go over here. We should be creatures of habit as it relates to podcasting. We should be creatures of habit as it relates to the audio sound that actually comes with our podcast. So making sure that you are actually in a place that's consistent, right? And it'll get you to the realm of podcasting. When I started back podcasting in 2017, I got up at 5:30 every Saturday morning, went to Starbucks, got a cup of coffee, came back home, and I recorded like 3 or 4 different episodes in my basement every Saturday morning consistently. And that just actually kind of helped me kind of build the consistency and actually go past that PodFade episode or PodFade process. So making sure that you actually have a really good consistent place to record is going to be imperative to your success.
Yeah, I would say, like we were just talking beforehand about our little studios here. So like everything I have for my live stream, so the same would be for live streaming, right? So everything I have
100%.
is here in this corner, so that when I need to go live, I just kind of pull it out and set it up so it's all right here. And if I had to like go through like setting and finding and pulling everything out every time, it would be really hard for me to do it every single time we had to do it.
100%. 100%.
And so if you're just joining us, we're talking with Steve Worthy. He's a podcast coach with Podcasters Live, talking podcasting, live streaming. You just brought this up a little bit, touched on it. Consistency is so important, right? So besides, maybe like doing it every Saturday morning, what are your tips for podcasters on making it past that dreaded number 7 episode?
Yeah, I think part of it, and it kind of goes back to community and building an ecosystem, if you will, around your podcast. The podcast is is recording a podcast is just one of the parts of the process. The other parts of the process is actually, of course, the promotion, all these other things. But the tendency is that we feel like, okay, we recorded the podcast and we sent it out there and everybody's going to listen. I remember I was talking to my mom when she was alive, and I had started back podcasting. And I moved into retail leadership with Steve Worthy podcast, and and I would call her, and she listened to my episode, and I'd be like, yeah, that's great, man, and got to like episode 5. I call her and I said, hey, you still listening to my podcast? And she's like, no, baby, no, that's not. That's not my audience. That's not my thing. What I'm saying is that even the people that love you sometimes will not be into what you're saying. So you have to find that tribe. You have to find those individuals who are going to be into what you say and what you're talking about, and find and creating an ecosystem, whether it's blog posts, articles, having a website. All these different things around your podcast will actually help provide gravity to your actual podcast, but also it will help provide encouragement and inspiration when you're down, because the tendency is you think that you're alone. But if you are creating an ecosystem and a community around your podcast, don't just think about your podcast as just a stationary, audio file. It is not. It's dynamic. You should be dynamic, and you should try to create a dynamic society or situation around your podcast, so that way it can help you when you're actually in those difficult moments.
What about discoverability? Like, as you just kind of touched on that, like, are there any ways to make it? Is it just through the promotion, putting it out there to make your podcast discoverable?
Yeah, great point. Great question. One of the things that now we're going to talk about live streaming, which is why we started Podcasters Live. But even before the live streaming aspect of it, is that you have to go where your audience is. We flood the market, right? The tendency is we put our podcast and we put something out there to every platform. Hey, listen to my podcast. Hey, listen to Amanda's podcast. Like, man, I don't even know you, Amanda. Like, what? Why do I need to listen? I'm just giving you the harsh truth. People just understand that. The idea is around how do you make sure that you are finding your right people, and you have to go to where they are. And it may be the most, the places that you will think the least of.
Mm.
It could be a Rotary Club. It could be, a PTA meeting. It could be somewhere like that, because the other side of it is that podcasting is a long tail game. You have to go and try to build your community, build your presence, and you have to build it where your people are. And that goes back to the idea around your content pillars, because if you're talking about everything, then that's what happens. You start to go everywhere. But if you focus in and hone in, guess what? Now you can actually get a little more specific on where you're actually going to put your marketing efforts into, so that you can get the biggest return for your investment.
Great. And like we said, everything we're talking about so far, as far as podcasting versus live streaming, pretty much the same: finding your niche, consistency, preparation, etc. But you talk about, you've identified that live streaming can be a great thing for podcasters to try. So if someone's thinking about, I don't know, podcast live stream, should they only have so many resources? Should they do both? Like, what would you suggest they consider?
Yeah, great question. Great question. The old podcaster in me will say do audio first, but the modern Steve, as it relates to the definition of podcasting, is a produced conversation. The focus is creating a conversation via live streaming, and now you can actually repurpose that content in so many different formats. The issue with live streaming is because you have to think about the camera. You have to think about equipment and gear. You can also utilize your phone. I know we probably may talk about that here in a second, but we teach people to utilize live streaming from a discoverability standpoint and an engagement with your audience. It is one of the best ways. Almost every podcaster I've spoken to, as I've kind of gotten into this, is, Steve, I don't know if anybody's listening. I don't know how to engage with my audience. Ratings and reviews are only one way. Well, when I discovered live streaming, I realized and utilized it as a platform to engage with my audience, so that they can learn a little bit more about me. They can see the person actually behind the microphone, ask me a question in person. We talk about live streaming in the context of it's almost like TV on your own terms, right? But it's also a participatory piece. it's not just a matter of you just exchanging information. It's participatory in nature. So you want to be able to, go back and forth, just like you are doing with your audience today. That's how you actually gain engagement. Now, when you engage and connect with people, you can move them over to a different platform. You can move them over to your audio podcast if you wanted to do that as well. But it's about discoverability and breaking down those barriers. I love live streaming because I have an international audience. We just saw somebody in the audience say that they were from the UK, right? This is one of the quickest ways to grow yourself internationally and break down those barriers, so that way you can grow your podcast and actually help you with discoverability.
Yeah, and I think the engagement piece is so important. I think one, it kind of gives you instant feedback, right? Like
100%.
whether the content is resonating with the audience. I also feel like it adds to the content itself when you're engaging with them and hearing what others are saying or thinking about whatever you're talking about. So there's so many important parts to live streaming that I think a lot of people
100%. I get my best content from the comments.
Mhm.
I get
Good
my
point.
best comments from when people are talking in the comments. I'm like, "Oh, that's really good." And I'll write it down, and the next thing you know, I feel like it'll be like I'm a brain, like I'm like super smart. Like, hey, next week we're gonna be talking about so and so, and I'm like, nah, dude, I just got that from the comments. Someone just asked that like 3 or 4 times, so I'm like, okay, that's on somebody's mind, so I'm gonna write that down.
Exactly. Content ideas. So it surface ideas as well. Xavier's asking, how soon should someone do a live stream after starting a podcast?
Yeah, that's a great question. It all depends on your bandwidth, right? I always talk about it in the context of bandwidth. Like, can you do both? Can you do podcasting and live streaming? Because both of them require different skill sets to some degree, but they also require different resources, equipment, all of those things as well. If you actually have the bandwidth, I would say just go ahead and get started, right? Try your best to understand, making sure that your podcasting content and your pillars, that you are going to be marrying those with your live stream, because there has to be continuity between the two. I've seen it where someone will start a podcast and they start live streaming, they're talking about 2 different topics and they're expecting both to grow. It's not. That's why we start talking about the ecosystem, is that making sure that there's continuity between the live streaming and the podcast. The biggest difference is going to be, of course, the podcast is the passive side of your ecosystem. The live streaming is the participatory side of it. But if you have the bandwidth, I would say go ahead and start it now. There are too many platforms out there now for free that will allow you to go ahead and get started. I just started exploring with all StreamYard, Riverside.fm. I was just like, I got crazy with how many different platforms I was just trying out when I first started. And then I just kind of landed on one, and I've been using that one ever since. But go ahead and get started, man.
Yeah, and Rhonda, this is the question we're going to jump into. Let's talk about equipment, platform, software. All right. So if you ever seen Steve do one of his live streams, he's got like behind the scenes cameras. Like, he's got a really slick setup there. You do not have to have that to start. We talked about this. I'm in the corner of my living room here. So if people are overwhelmed, we talk about tech overwhelm, like they're just paralyzed before even to get started. So the bare minimum you think they need, let's start with maybe podcasting and then go to live streaming. What the bare minimum?
Oh man, podcasting. So I started with a $79 mic. It's actually still right over there. It is a Rode NT USB. It is a USB mic. And I ran that mic right into my iPad, and I recorded right into Audacity, which is a free software. And I bought some $19 headphones. The reason why I simplified it up front was to, reduce the barriers of entry, to reduce the barriers or the friction that most podcasters face. So when I did that and I started doing that, then I was able to build up the bandwidth and actually, buy more equipment and things like that. But I'm telling you, a really solid mic, whether it is, I would not recommend and let me make sure I help you with this too. I wouldn't recommend what we call a condenser mic, which is what that first mic that I had started out. There are $99, $79 dynamic mics. And the reason why is because The dynamic mics will only pick up what they have right here in front of you. This is this cone of volume that it will pick up. The condenser mic will pick up everything. So if you don't have a treated room, if you're recording in a bigger room, you want a dynamic mic, and you can pick up those for $79, $89 easily on Amazon. Audacity, easiest way to go ahead and start to get recording. It's free, as well, and then get some headphones. The last piece is to make sure that you have the content to actually start your podcast with as well. Hope that helps. I try to keep it as very simple as possible.
Do you recommend them using Libsyn, or what kind of platform do you suggest they release? Apple? What is the best?
Great question. The next piece is that the hosting site is really just that. The hosting site is almost kind of the distributor of your podcast. So Apple and Spotify, they don't necessarily host your podcast. The hosting company, I use Buzzsprout. And the thing about a lot of the hosting platforms now is very ubiquitous. They have a lot of the same features and functionality. Part of the one reason I picked Buzzsprout was because they actually had a podcast themselves. And a lot of people actually who operate Buzzsprout had a podcast. So for me, it was important to actually have and work with the company who actually are doing what they're talking about. And part of that, once you have a hosting platform, you upload your content, the directory, the host actually pushes it out to all the different directories. It is Apple, Spotify, but they're very simple to use. The user interface on a lot of these platforms are extremely easy. So I think part of that learning curve is going to be very easy, more so than what you can anticipate.
Yeah, we'll drop some of these links into the comments to share with all of you. We use Libsyn for us at the Content Marketing Institute, but like Steve said, you find one of those platforms, and then like you said, they push it out for you, so you don't have to worry about going. And they're all very, very easy to use. Xavier says, and Steve and I talked about this, I'm a little camera shy, but what the heck, I'll do it. I mean, you may not like it, how you look and sound and act the first few times you do it, but I promise you that you get more comfortable the more you do
100%.
it.
I started, and I still have the footage to prove it. It is on my YouTube channel. It's actually on my Worthy Retail U channel. I started with the camera from my iMac. So I was using the camera from my iMac, and it was super blurry, all these things. Then I finally bought a webcam, right? And so part of it was just going after it with what you have and getting the reps in. And once you start to get the reps in, the ability to be more comfortable, finding your own voice. I know that was part of it, and I actually had it in the notes, and I didn't talk about it, but finding your own voice. And I don't mean your actual voice, but finding your own voice as a podcaster takes time. 7, 10, 15, maybe 20 episodes, even live streaming. To find a rhythm, it takes time, right? But you won't do it, right? You don't get the big chest if you don't do the push-ups, right? You keep saying, oh my gosh, my chest. But if you don't do the push-ups, it's not going to happen. It's the same thing with getting better with live streaming and podcasting. That's how you find your voice and your rhythm and what you're known for as well. I am an old professor to at heart, and so part of my, I guess, persona is more professorial. I teach, and so that's kind of part of my voice. But you'll find your own voice as you put the reps in as well.
Yes, and let's talk real quick because we didn't on live streaming. So, like Steve said, I was the same way. I started with my laptop and what they call it, the potato camera, I guess, right there, and have progressed. But so do is your suggestion just start it and then kind of go from there?
100%, because the tendency once again is that it's a comparison trap, right? All of this you see here took years. It took a while. And it's actually part of my business. So it's not just something I do to just do. This is part of my business. So if I'm going to do the business, I need to look like a professional, right? And if I'm going to be talking about it, that's what I need to do. But when I started out, it was just like, I need to start. And the live streaming part of it was StreamYard, Restream, all these kind of sort of free platforms initially to go in and get their reps in and create your content and your flow and your show structure. The other part about live streaming is to, once again, very similar to podcasting, try to look at as many live stream as possible, right? Sherrod Jones, who's in the audience, and she hates countdown timers. She can't stand countdown timers. She just loathes them. And I remember when I first started live streaming, I would watch very popular live streamers, and they would have like a 8-minute countdown timer. And so I was like, well, dude, I'm gonna have like an 8-minute countdown timer. And I was just like, and I remember I think Cher was like years ago, she said, dude, stop. Nobody is like hanging out for like 8 minutes. And I was like, okay. So take it with a grain of salt when you look at other people and their live streaming. So just think about it. Just a little cautionary tale.
Sorry, Cher, I have a countdown timer in mind. It's only 30 seconds, though.
I still use a countdown timer. I still use one. I love Cher to death, but I still use one now. So I still do.
It's not 8 minutes, I promise. Well, thank you so much, Steve. I bet you and I could probably keep talking for quite a while, but thank you for your time. Thanks everyone for joining us. Absolutely. And Steve, you are actually going to be speaking here at an upcoming event produced by our friend Michelle Gomez with the African American Marketing Association. It's called the Marketing for the Culture Summit in Houston, Texas. And you're going to be talking about something interesting there as well.
Yes. We have an upcoming book called How to Beat Podcaster Syndrome. And so we are going to be talking about podcaster syndrome from of course, a marketing standpoint, content creator perspective on kind of the causes of podcaster syndrome. Of course, it's a play on the word imposter syndrome, but I'm a podcaster, so we use podcaster syndrome. And we're going to be talking about our process of helping you overcome it, but also helping you realize that when you are feeling that feeling of podcaster syndrome, that means you're actually on the brink of something big. So embrace it. Focus in on it. Give yourself the space, and so we're going to be talking about that at the Marketing for the Culture. I'm really excited about it.
Yes, Michelle's a good friend. If you're in the Houston or Texas area, head over to aa-ma.org, get your tickets there as well. Steve, where else, if someone wants to connect with you, have more questions, where else can they find
LinkedIn
you?
is going to be the first place. I always have people go to LinkedIn and connect with me on LinkedIn, and then from there we start a dialogue. It's just one of the best places because Podcasters Live, you can go there, of course, to check out what we do, but LinkedIn, Steve Worthy at LinkedIn, first and foremost place to connect with me.
All right, awesome. If you have anything else, we'll try to drop some of those links into the comments that the equipment and stuff we were talking about. Just get started. That's what I always say. That's my number one tip for everyone. Just get started and then go from there. If you saw my first live stream, not very good.
No, that's a post. That's a post. See, now you just said something. Now you got to post that. Actually, here's the thing. We will both, like, sometime this week, Amanda and I will both post like a picture of our very first like kind of setup. So that way you guys can kind of see and
Yes, how we've progressed, and you can add lights and everything, but just start it and go from there. So, all right, Steve, thank you so much. This was awesome. Thanks for everyone else who joined us today. We appreciate